This episode of the ZuLoo Poodcast is sponsored by ZuLoo Inc., a benefit corporation dedicated to the goal of universal access to toilets, hygiene, clean water and sanitation through the power of social enterprise. Learn more at ZuLoo.com.
It also says avoid caffeine as it will dehydrate you, and obviously to seek medical advice if it's a recurring problem. Obviously, don't put anything up there that you shouldn't or that may be damaging, right?
Well, we could do a whole episode on that.
Yeah. So anyway, those are all things you should be aware of, right?
Well, the more
and
you know,
heard it
folks.
First. You heard it first on the ZuLoo Poodcast.
Welcome to the ZuLoo Poodcast, where we talk all things poop, toilets, and sanitation. Through insightful news, impact stories, and quirky humor, we aim to discuss and highlight the critical role toilets play in whisking poop out of our lives, the impact toilets have, or lack thereof, in the health and wellness of humanity, and what ZuLoo is doing to help solve the current global sanitation crisis.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We're so happy to have you here on the ZuLoo Poodcast. I am one of your hosts, Jocelyn Gardner, joined by...
Darren Mangum.
There we go.
Your co-host and backstop, punching bag.
I like this shirt.
Sidekick,
I'm getting lots of Robert Redford vibes over there.
Oh, yeah. This is
that what you were going
Shannon
for?
bought me this and said,
yes.
You must wear this shirt. Most of the time.
She was right.
And I'm like,
looks
okay,
really good.
I'll wear it,
Well done, Shannon, as always. All right.
So I'd like to say I picked it out, but she was like...
But then you'd be lying.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, okay. We have a wonderful interview today. Christine Lee. I'm really excited to jump into that because we talk to a lot of people.
Yeah.
No one really has a straight shot into sanitation. It's not like they graduate college and then say, I think I want to do this.
It's not something you grow up aspiring to.
Right.
It's something you sort of...
You fall into, or it finds you. And Christine's journey to it, I think, is pretty fascinating. And we kind of go down that road.
You could say all kinds of things.
Right.
Something happens in your life where you're like, what?
And, it's like you've been called.
Yeah, exactly.
To tackle poop.
Right.
Okay, but before we get into Christine, what news do you have for us?
So, Poo News. Thanks for tuning in. I wanted to share this article. Have you ever had a painful poop, Trevor? I don't know why.
I'm glad you didn't ask me directly.
I don't know why. I feel more comfortable asking Trevor this instead of
any
Jocelyn.
woman who's had a baby.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
you should
terrifying.
pay attention to that because this article it's by Dr. Evan Goldstein, who is founder and CEO of Bespoke Surgical and the Future Method sexual wellness brand. He said that over it's like 200 let's see, what's the statistic? 250,000 Americans deal with painful poop.
I imagine diet has a lot to do with something.
You talk about having a baby and all that.
Yeah.
So that's it's more common than you. He says it's thinner skin or tissue that compose the anus is very susceptible to minor tears from time to time, and that you should be aware of it. It's not just I think I'm going to just push it out and, kind of not worry about it. Right. So if you are getting those painful, especially if there's blood involved or any of that type of thing, you probably should go talk to a doctor about it.
What do they do for that though? Is that because you can't stop having bowel movements and it seems like every time you would, it would just make it worse.
Right. Yeah. And so he says sometimes the tissue becomes fragile and prone to re-tearing, and you might develop skin tags or scar tissue that affects both function and appearance.
Oh, well,
as if you were
equally important.
Yeah. How concerned are you about your appearance down there? Anyway, he says here you should, if you notice a new fissure, he says that you should take over-the-counter stool softener or bathe with Epsom salts. try a prescription compound ointment, consume high fiber foods. Obviously, there's a problem. If there's a problem in your poop itself, you should address that, right? And then don't use baby wipes or things that contain chemicals. It also says avoid caffeine as it will dehydrate you, and obviously to seek medical advice if it's a recurring problem. Obviously, don't put anything up there that you shouldn't or that may be damaging, right?
Well, we could do a whole episode on that.
Yeah. So anyway, those are all things you should be aware of, right?
Well, the more
and
you know,
heard it
folks.
first. You heard it first on the ZuLoo Poodcast. And so anyway, yeah, so that's the hot news going on. That's right. Any questions?
I'm not sure how to transition that.
Yes.
Like a natural segue into our really special interview with Christine, because it was fantastic.
I say, Christine, we become buddies because we're both sailors. I mean, she saw my LinkedIn profile.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And said, "Hey, it says you're a sailor," and she sent me a photo of her and her family on a Lagoon 42 catamaran. Cool. And I'm like, I was on one of those exact same boats last year with my family and some friends, and so we exchanged sailing photos and a few videos. And so, she's my new sailing buddy.
Sweet.
So
you've got a sailing buddy in Singapore.
When we go to Singapore, we gotta go do some sailing,
Well, let's jump into that interview with Christine in Singapore. It was a lot of fun.
Well, let's just dive into it, because I did think that was really interesting. Your bio there's a lot of depth there. You've done you've had a lot of interesting experience in different industries, but I was curious, what's the connection? How did you get here to sanitation? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Sure. That's a great place to start. My background, I'm from Singapore. Currently, I live between Singapore and Perth. So half of my kids are in Australia, and the other half are in Singapore. I'm a mother of 4. And I've been in the banking industry for a very long time. So I'm your very typical corporate, citizen, stakeholder values, stakeholder returns, double-digit growth, all of that stuff. And I did that for a long time, 30 years. And I kind of peaked in my career fairly early. So now when I think about my life, I think of it in 3 different phases. The first phase was really about success upon success. It was about moving the corporate ladder. It was about building up my financial nest egg, even in my 20s. I was always very conscious of the fact that there will come a rainy day. There will come situations in the market, because the market goes up, it goes down. It's stuff like that. And because I was a single mom very early with my 4 kids, I had single mother. Single income, 4 children was always how I thought about it. Like, I had to make sure that I provided for the children, whatever they needed, all those typical stuff as we were growing up. And I was very, very blessed, because I kind of peaked quite early in my career. So probably in my mid 40s, I went, I got to a point where I said, you know what? I've kind of done what I wanted to do from a career point of view. There's never going to be enough. I didn't want to be driven by greed. And I wanted to take a pause. So I did. And then I went into this second phase of my career life, where I kind of call it a point of reflection, inflection, repurposing. Where I took 7 years off, and in the Bible, 7 years is it's the perfect number, right? And so those 7 years, I tried out many different things. I didn't take a break, but I didn't do banking. I didn't do a job. I became an entrepreneur. I invested in some companies. I bought and sold a micro biodiesel refinery in Indonesia. I became a consultant for medtech, edutech, fintech, techfin, stuff
All
like
the
that.
techs.
Different types of techs, right? I mean, it's, skills are applicable. The thought process is always applicable. So I became a consultant on special projects, which I thought were quite fun. I did some fun stuff as well. As you can see the back, of my backdrop, I picked this, scenic beachside um, um, background, because I'm very much a beach bum as well. So my biggest ambition in life is to build up enough, be happy, and then hit the beach and pretty much live in a beach hut, a small beach hut.
Well,
So I did a lot of diving and
Puerto
sailing.
Rico then.
I would love, Latin America. I would love South America. In fact, that's exactly what I'll be doing next year. I'll take a month off and just go wandering around the beaches. So yeah, I did that. I was the coach as well. I did a lot of leadership coaching for career transition. For I can't name names, obviously, for non-disclosure reasons. But I was working very closely with 25, maybe 28 C-suite leaders from all over the world, from Australia to Brunei to obviously Asia, to the UK, and I worked with individuals, and it was when I was working on these different sort of projects of passion. And probably sitting at the beach and thinking about things during that 7-year window period, it kind of dawned on me that I needed to get into this third phase of my life where it's about achieving significance and not success. And it reminded me of a book that I read when I was about 21, 22 years old. And it's a book by a gentleman called Bob Buford, and it's called Time Out. And so I realized that my phase 2 was my timeout of 7 years. It was scary as well because I didn't have a name card to put against myself. I didn't have a corporate identity during those 7 years. But I did so many different things. I worked on maybe 40 different projects, including, by the way, being a manager, a relief manager of a resort in Indonesia. So I did all sorts of different things during those 7 years. And then I started embarking on my third phase, which started probably about 5-ish years ago, where, and I'm a Christian, the Lord put in my heart that I need to impact 1 billion people. And he put that little niggling feeling in my heart for a very long time, but I kind of pushed it aside because, I'm doing coaching, I'm a consultant. What 1 billion people? It's impossible. But then, when I started,
That's a big number.
believing in it, it's 1 in 8 people in the world. I walk along the street. It's 1 in 8.
So you had that number stuck in your head. 1 billion.
I had that 1 billion. It's been stuck in my head maybe for about 10, 15 years now, but it really only became real to me about 5, 6 years ago. And then I said, okay, I'm kind of now ready to embark on this phase of achieving significance, of servant leadership, of achieving impact, and putting behind success by normal definitions, especially in an environment where I live in Singapore, most times now anyway, where it's very, very corporate. So yeah, I went on that phase, and I started. And World Vision International contacted me on LinkedIn, which I didn't see the email or the message until 3 months later. And I woke up at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night one morning, and it just popped in my head. I think the Lord popped a little message in my heart and in my head at 3 a.m. and said, "Check your email." And I checked my email, and there was nothing. And then I checked my Twitter, and I checked my, everything else, and there was nothing. And then I checked my LinkedIn messages, and I scrolled back 3 months back, and I found this message from World Vision, which said, "We've been trying to reach you for a while. Will you come and work with us?" And I knew at that point that was my start into impact work. So my caveat today is, and I know this is the Poodcast. I know very little about sanitation. I am a retired banker who's an outdoorsy person. I'm a digital nomad. I travel 85% of my time. I serve on some boards now where I think that impact leading to the 1 billion people makes sense. And then I just go where, the next epiphany comes.
So, well, first of all, thank you. It was really fun to kind of come along that journey with you and hear about these different phases and stages of your life, and how maybe it almost takes some distance from them to interpret what they meant. When you're in it, it's a little bit hard, but when you get some distance from it, you can kind of evaluate and understand what that period was for and how it served a purpose. And now you're on to the next thing. I loved what you said about there's a time, or, you said it better than I am about to, but not just success, but significance, the difference between those two things. That's a very intriguing idea to kind of see those two things side by side and interpret what that meant to you at that time. And for people who don't know what World Vision is, when they contacted you, what is that organization and what were they asking your help with?
Yeah, well, World Vision needed someone to manage operations in Asia Pacific for the microfinance institution. So they needed someone who was an ex-banker who had a passion for impact. And so, I worked 20 years of my life in banking. And so I knew exactly what to do, risk management and bottom lines and all of those things. But at the same time, World Vision, has a specific arm, which is for its microfinance institutions in probably now about 25, 27 different countries. And that was really about helping the impoverished, the vulnerable communities around the world to take on small micro loans and then be able to educate them on right borrowing, on responsible borrowing and responsible repayment. And then over a period of time, be able to achieve that multiplier impact of what a loan could do. It could multiply up to 3.5, 4 times within one generation. The wealth, the take-home income of a household with a microloan. And so it was really about hand-holding communities through that. So that was sort of taking banking into impact. And that started, my journey. And of course, I'm now retired from that as well. And I'm serving currently on the Prison Fellowship International Board, Global Board. We're in 123 countries in the world, 19,000 prisons, 12 million prisoners, 19 million children of prisoners that we're looking to impact now, and serving on the board and being invited the, being given the honor and the privilege to serve on the global board that oversees these 123 countries and what's going on over there, is incredible. I mean, I'm new to it, but that is just incredible impact.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're a banker and you're talking to a lawyer, myself, and a photographer, artist, and I think maybe all of us combined maybe know a little bit about sanitation generally, but it's the impact, I think, that really motivates us. The impact that sanitation, and we've been doing this with ZuLoo for a number of years now, and just to see the impact that just a toilet has in the lives of people. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a banker, lawyer, photographer, whatever. It's it's the impact, I think, that sort of drives us, and we don't have to be experts. We can on the Poodcast, we're not claiming to be experts, but we're facilitating the conversation. And so, anyway,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how does, I know your path has led you to doing work in Mongolia. Bring us to Mongolia. How did this come about for you?
Right. So when I was working with World Vision International in the microfinance division, one of the countries that was under my purview was Mongolia. And so I was doing my annual trips to Mongolia. I was doing my field trips. And it was really in my last field trip a year ago, while I was still with World Vision, that I visited the Gur district, and I needed to go to the loop. Right? And it was exactly in spring. It was the start of, it was spring. It was the first week of April. It wasn't supposed to be snowing, but it was. The grounds were icy. And in the Gur district, and for those who don't know what the Gur district is, in various parts all over Mongolia, probably about 40% of the total population of Mongolia, they still live in tents. These big tents, which sometimes we call them yurts or yurts, and within the Gur district, which is found outside of Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital of Mongolia, they are the migrants. They are the nomadic communities. They are the herders who have lived outside of Mongolia, who've moved themselves around, and they were moving. There's a trend of rural to urban migration that's been happening in Mongolia for a long time. And so they were moving towards the capital. Hopefully the younger people could find work, could go to better schools, and so on. And they lived in these tents just outside of the capital, on the slopes, right? It's pretty slopey, Mongolia. So when I was there and I needed to go to the bathroom, we all do. We all need to go pee 6 or 8 times a day, right? On average.
Despite no matter what we do, we're human and we can't stop.
That's right. No matter what we do, no matter who we are, we need to go to the bathroom 6 or 8 times a day, if not more. And so when I needed to go to a toilet in the Gur district, and it was spring, it was snowing a little bit, the floors were a little bit icy and pretty dicey, and there was only a pit latrine, which was probably about 30 meters, 20 to 30 meters from the yurt. And that's where people go to do their business. Now, pit latrine is, a hole dug in the ground averaging about 3 meters depth, half a meter or 1 meter, 1 meter wide, maybe less, and with a plank across. And you pretty much get into that, you squat over that, or you stand over that, and you do your business. I almost fell in there. I kid you not. It, it was slippery. It was icy.
Oh, Christine. Oh.
I couldn't. Now, but first and foremost, I was in 3 layers. I come from tropical, just above the equator, Singapore. And it was cold for me, even though it was spring. It was still -4 degrees in Mongolia. Mm-hmm. And it was slippery and icy, and I almost fell in. And I just couldn't go in there. And I walked away. I went back to the office with my colleagues. I sat down with my colleagues from World Vision, and I said, guys, we got to solve the sanitation issue of Mongolia. I know WASH is a big thing that's been launched by the Mongolian government for a while. Everyone was doing their own little bit around WASH, and all the NGOs were doing their own tiny little bit. And when everyone's doing a little bit, it never adds up. Right. And I said, World Vision, are you ready to solve this problem? Can we look at eliminating pit latrines in all of Mongolia? And I mean eliminate. Right. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And I said, let me call my very good friend that I've known for almost 20 years, Mr. Jack Sim from Singapore. So I picked up my mobile and I WhatsApped Jack and I said, Jack, want to come to Mongolia and help me solve, sanitation? He's like, all right, tell me when, let's go. And you guys have met Jack, and he is just full of energy, and he's like, go-getter.
He was probably on the next plane to Mongolia, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so that's exactly what happened. We got together, Jack and his folks, his team, myself, the World Vision Mongolia team. We got together and we said, okay, let's figure out how do we get this into a national agenda. Because if it's not a national agenda, it's not going to happen for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen in our generation. And, I'm not about, Jack and I are quite similar in terms of the way we work, like chop, chop, let's get on with it and move as quickly. And we want to get that impact as quickly as possible while the fervor is there.
Every region has different challenges when it comes to sanitation. I'm not familiar with, what would be the specifics of, some of the challenges that would present themselves in Mongolia. Certainly, you mentioned it's cold. That's got to factor in there somewhere. But oftentimes there's, cultural factors that you need to be sensitive to, religious, all kinds of things. What is the Mongolian toilet revolution? You have a 3 to 5 year plan. If everything goes perfectly, what does it look like at the end of 5 years? Where, if pit latrines are gone, what has taken their place?
Okay. The biggest issue with Mongolia or issues with Mongolia is the expanse of the land, right? It's a really small population, only 3.2, 3.5 million people. And we're talking about approximately 2 persons per square kilometer on average.
Wow.
Right? It's huge. And that's one. They are nomadic as part of their heritage and culture. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of move around. Their herders, they move their cattle and their horses, and they shift around. Those are the ones who are living in the rural areas. And of course, there is a growing city life in Mongolia, all centered around Ulaanbaatar, which is the main city. That's the capital. Half of the population of Mongolia, so 1.5 million people, live in Ulaanbaatar. And more than half, or about half of those people, live in these tents outside of the city with no electricity, no water, no waste management, no sewage systems, none of that. So that's the backdrop, right? And then, of course, the next biggest issue, as you've mentioned, Jocelyn, is the temperature. It gets as cold as minus 45 degrees.
My goodness.
I mean,
I can't imagine living in a tent in negative 45 degrees. These are some tough folks.
And you would be layered up with maybe 4 or 5 layers of animal fur, right? And in that sort of temperature. And imagine if the toilet was 20, 30 meters outside of your camp tent, and you had to walk in the snow or the ice there, potentially slipping. And by the way, there are children who fall into the pit latrines and pass away every year without fail. And so climate, typical water-based toilets just cannot work. And so we have to find the right technical solution. We have to find the right way to allow the concept of sanitation in toilets to cut across, a huge, vast land of people who may not see their next neighbor for 20 kilometers. And so how do you build that, right? So your question was, how would it look like in 3 to 5 years? I mentioned earlier, I think it's really crucial that Mongolia owns the Mongolia toilet revolution. There's people like yourselves, there's me, there's Jack, there's others who can help to support it, guide it. But Mongolia needs to own the problem. And so involving at the most senior level, getting the endorsement and the sponsorship of the president, the prime minister, is critical. At this point in time, we've started to engage with individuals, ex-ministers of Mongolia, who can help us to bring that agenda to the right people. So it's a lot about how do we engage. Then it's about getting the various ministries involved. Now, the situation we have right now is not because no one's thinking about sanitation. It is because everyone's thinking about sanitation in a different way. And I think that's the problem. The Ministry of Tourism is thinking about building rest stops from the city, from the airport, to the camping sites for tourists, every 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers apart. And they're thinking about doing that. The Ministry of Health is thinking about, how do we get people to have toilets, and use toilets in the hospitals, or in the schools, for Ministry of Education, or, Ministry of Construction and Real Estate. They're trying to build toilets and they're building low-cost housing. But there are no standards, there are no policies, then nobody knows exactly what it's supposed to look like when everything comes together. So what we're advocating as a pro-tem committee is the setup of a Mongolian National Sanitation Council with sponsorship from the top highest in the country, but with representation across the various ministries, so that within the council, we can set the right laws, the right policies, the right standards, give the right guidance, look at technical solutions. And all of that potentially, with Jack's great support, means that we want to have, and we will be having, the World Toilet Organization Summit in Mongolia in 2026. That's been the agreement from the various stakeholders.
I had heard that there's a rumor going around about the World Toilet Summit in Mongolia, but you just, is that still in the works, or you said 2026? Is that?
And that would be a year and a half from today. And that would give us enough time for us to build up the momentum, the fervor, bring people together, get that white paper sent up to the right people, and then back down again to the right places to get the right people involved. And all of that, I reckon would take about a year and a half. And so that was,
it can't,
that was part 3.
Yeah, it can't come soon enough, right? It's and Jack probably, he likes to move fast as well, so probably not fast enough.
Yeah, but well, the hardest thing of any project that I've found through the last 30 over years of my career has been always the initial stage, right? It's taking the time to step away, what I call, and I do this with my coaching, I do this with my strategic planning and everything else, is I throw the problem into the center and I kind of draw an imaginary circle around it. And then I step out of the circle and I look in again and I go, right, what are we dealing with here? What are the cultural issues, the agendas of the various parties, and how do we make everybody look good? How do we make everybody happy? And how do we get everybody working a little part of everything, but as part of a big picture?
You said it earlier. It has to come from the Mongolian people. It has to be that ground up. You've got to get the top down and the ground up. All that has to gel. It can't be imposed from outside. You could light the spark, but it's got to catch fire and just be internalized, right? As part of what the local people want.
Yeah, and one of the things I've learned from Jack, quite apart from his guerrilla marketing techniques, which personally I've done some of guerrilla marketing in my banking life as well, right? And hence I said, Jack and I are quite similar in some ways. Is also the fact that we've got to deal with the problem face on, right up front, but we've got to get the right people into the picture, taking ownership. And that's key. It's getting the real influencers and the sponsors involved in the process very, very early on. That's going to make the difference, whether it's any organization. That's what's key. And coming from the corporate world where I've done this, 35 years of my life, building plans around strategies which involves collaboration. That's it. And that's all it is. And
well, Christine, we started this interview asking, how did you go from, your corporate banking life into this impacting 1 billion people and solving a sanitation crisis in an entire country? But now it makes sense because you do have a very systematic, strategic way of thinking through these problems. And this multifaceted approach you're taking to involving all of these different organizations in Mongolia to inspire and give resources to them coming up with a solution that works best for them. When you're done impacting the billion people, will you just come to me and help me and coach my life? I need a 3-part plan for my life.
We can pick up the phone and chat, after this. Not a problem.
I'll come visit you in Australia.
By the way, I do that all the time, Yes.
Well, yes, please help this photographer brain, systematize my life and be a little bit more strategic about it. But it's going to be really, really fun to see how this Mongolian toilet revolution evolves over the next 3 to 5 years. World Toilet Day is special to us here at ZuLoo. We always look forward to the big summit. Where's it going to happen? It will be incredibly fascinating and rewarding, I'm sure, for you to hold it in Mongolia, where you are trying to, ensure that this revolution catches fire and makes a big difference for these people. We love talking to people like you. I can totally understand why you and Jack jive. You both have these big, ambitious goals, and you guys are the kind of people that make those big changes. And we thank you so much. We can't wait to hear how this goes. We want to stay updated. Keep us in the loop.
Thank you. we got to do this from a place of servitude. If we're looking, if we all have, if Jack or myself or some of my colleagues who are involved in this project have a side agenda, of our own, then it's going to be really difficult, right? It's just got to come from a place where, we're gonna give it this shot, but we're gonna give it this shot, expecting that the reward is gonna come from, the reward's not gonna frankly come from recognition, which we all need, or monetary, which we all need to survive. It's not gonna come in that way, it's really gonna come from a place of gratification. I think that's what drives it. It's gratification. And for me, I'm kind of at, everything in my life is about phases, right? I've gone through phase 1, growing up, phase 2, career, phase 3, now, the last 20 years I've been mother and I've been providing. And I think in the next 20, possibly the last 20 years of my life, it's got to mean something. It's got to, and all I hope to have, frankly, I have to quote this 2 lines from a song, which means a lot to me. It's a gospel song. It's by a gospel singer. His name is Steve Green, and he says in his song, the song's called "Find Us Faithful," right? And in the song, he says, someday when our children sift through all that we've left behind, may the clues that they discover and the memories they uncover become the light that leads them to the road that they must find. And I think, just that's exactly it. That's what it is. That I would like someday, at the end of the next 20 years, plus minus, that my kids would say, "Oh, that's what you stood for," and that's it. And hopefully they'll be proud of Mom.
I don't think it's going to take 20 years. I'm pretty sure they're really proud of you now. You've accomplished so much. You've lived many, many lives, and we're grateful that you've landed, here in this space. And keep us updated. We want to hear about all the success stories.
All right. Christine is wonderful.
Christine, sailing buddy. Love that gal. She is so enthusiastic, and she's another example of people that, they didn't start out to become, get into the sanitation business, but sometimes like the sanitation bug could just bite you and you just can't let it go. And that's, her, she's bringing all of her enthusiasm from her banking business and her, her coaching history. She's bringing all that enthusiasm to address the sanitation crisis in specifically in Mongolia, which is kind of her backyard right there. So
it was, she's obviously extremely competent, very successful in a myriad of ways. And it was fun to hear her passion about this very specific thing, and specifically in Mongolia and some of the unique challenges that they faced there.
Speaking of Mongolia, I mean, I don't know if what's the guy's name who is Obi-Wan Kenobi? What's his name?
The Scottish dude?
Yeah. What's his name?
Oh my gosh. Ewan McGregor.
Ewan McGregor, right? I always say his name wrong. Ewan McGregor, but he's got that Netflix show where they're riding motorcycles. I don't know if you've seen it.
I don't know that one.
He and his buddy, they're riding motorcycles. You probably know this motorcycle guy.
Yeah. Great series.
Yeah, I think last season they rode all the way from like Argentina all the way up the.
Oh, like it's a reality show.
It's a reality show that's like, they're just on these 2 motorcycles and they just kind of stop in and meet all these people. But I think it was like the last season, right? They rode from across Europe into Russia and across over into Mongolia. And so they're riding across Mongolia, and it's super remote. I mean, very few, and their motorcycles are breaking down because they're not they're not off-road bikes, but there's no roads. That's just like dirt roads, and they're just white knuckling it. But
it's kind
anyway,
of
but you get a little glimpse into Mongolia, and it's like, wow, just beautiful people.
Very stark landscape.
Stark landscape, but it's just it is just has such history, and yeah, I mean, it sort of opened my eyes, and so I think we watched that kind of not too long after we interviewed Christine, and but yeah, just sort of opened my eyes to that whole culture that usually gets eclipsed by China, and you look at all these bigger countries, but Mongolia, it's a huge, vast landmass, but population wise, I can't remember it was very small population, but still.
Well, it'll be really exciting to hear updates from Christine on her initiatives there and what they're able to accomplish. I mean, she is very dedicated to getting things done on a certain timeline. So
yeah, we're totally excited. I mean, I told her, hey, ZuLoo is going to, I think, also in Poo News, you probably know about this toilet summit coming up in November.
November 19th.
November 19th, World Toilet Day.
World Toilet Day. Sorry.
Is we're going to be doing it in India this year. And then also for the following year, hopefully Mongolia, maybe. We'll see. Christine's working behind the scenes to make that happen. So anyway, yeah.
Awesome. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the ZuLoo Poodcast. Follow us on social media at our links in the show notes below. To learn more, visit our website, ZuLoo.org. If you liked the podcast, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. For even more ZuLoo fun, send us an email with your toilet stories to podcast@zuloo.com for a chance to be featured on the podcast. This episode of the ZuLoo Poodcast is sponsored by ZuLoo Inc., a benefit corporation dedicated to the goal of universal access to toilets, hygiene, clean water, and sanitation through the power of social enterprise. Learn more at ZuLoo.com.